how I discovered that a few simple vegetables could completely change the way people feel after the age of 60. Honestly started with a question that most folks never even stop to ask themselves. And that question is this: what if the difference between aging with strength and aging with struggle was sitting quietly in the produce aisle this whole time? Think about that for a moment, because most people assume growing older automatically means less energy, weaker joints, slower thinking, more doctor visits, more medication bottles lined up on the kitchen counter, and that feeling where you wake up in the morning and your body just doesn't feel the way it used to. But what if a big part of that story isn't actually age itself? What if it's the food we keep putting on our plates every single day without thinking about it? Because here's something interesting that a top nutritionist recently explained during a conversation that honestly stuck in my mind. He said when he studies the lifestyles of people who stay active and sharp well into their 70s, 80s, sometimes even their 90s, he often notices a pattern that surprises people. These individuals aren't necessarily following complicated diets or buying expensive supplements advertised on late-night television. Instead, they consistently eat a handful of vegetables that many others ignore or underestimate. And the fascinating thing is that these vegetables quietly support circulation, brain health, digestion, muscle function, and even emotional well-being in ways that people rarely talk about in everyday conversations. Now, before we go further, let me ask you something directly, because I want you to think about your own habits for a second. When you go grocery shopping, do you usually reach for the same foods you've been eating for the past 20 or 30 years? Maybe the same breakfast, the same lunch, the same dinner rotation. Because most of us fall into routines like that without even noticing it. And routines feel comfortable, but sometimes they quietly hold us back. Especially when our bodies start changing after 60. Because here's the reality that nutrition experts keep repeating again and again. As we age, our bodies process nutrients differently. Metabolism slows, muscles lose some strength, circulation becomes a little less efficient, and inflammation tends to increase in the body. And that inflammation is actually one of the biggest hidden reasons many seniors begin experiencing joint stiffness, fatigue, memory fog, and other frustrating symptoms that people often blame entirely on age, when in fact, diet plays a huge role in the background. So when that nutritionist started explaining the vegetables he recommends most often for adults over 60, I was expecting something complicated or exotic. Maybe something you'd have to order online from some fancy organic store across the country. But instead, he started listing vegetables that are probably sitting in your grocery store right now and maybe even inside your refrigerator already. Vegetables like spinach, broccoli, carrots, sweet potatoes, and one surprising vegetable that he said might be one of the most powerful for circulation and brain function later in life. And we're going to talk about that one soon, because the story behind it is actually pretty fascinating. But first, let's talk about spinach, because even though it's simple, it might quietly be one of the most underrated foods for people over 60. Now, when many people hear the word spinach, they immediately remember those childhood moments when their parents told them to eat it, and they pushed it around the plate, hoping nobody would notice. And honestly, spinach doesn't always sound exciting compared to burgers or pizza or desserts. But nutritionally speaking, spinach is like a quiet powerhouse. It contains magnesium, which helps muscles relax and function properly. It contains nitrates that support blood vessel health and circulation. And it contains antioxidants that help protect cells from the stress that naturally builds up as we age. And when circulation improves, something interesting happens in the body, because better circulation means more oxygen reaching the brain, more nutrients reaching muscles, and often a noticeable improvement in energy levels throughout the day. And I remember hearing a story from a retired teacher named Margaret who said that after turning 67 she started adding a handful of spinach into her morning omelet almost every day, because her daughter kept insisting she try it. And Margaret laughed when she first told the story because she thought the idea that spinach could make any real difference sounded ridiculous. But after a couple of months, she realized she felt less sluggish during the afternoon hours when she usually wanted to nap. And she said maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was just the routine change. But she kept eating it because she felt better, and honestly, that's what matters most. Now, another vegetable that nutritionists constantly praise for adults over 60 is broccoli. And broccoli has an interesting reputation because some people love it while others absolutely hate it. But from a scientific perspective, broccoli contains compounds that help the body fight inflammation and support detoxification processes inside the liver. And inflammation is something that becomes more common as people age, which is why many seniors begin experiencing joint discomfort or slower recovery after physical activity. And broccoli contains a compound called sulforaphane that researchers have studied for its potential role in supporting cellular health and protecting tissues from damage caused by oxidative stress, which basically means it helps your body handle the wear and tear of everyday life a little more efficiently. And one doctor actually joked during a nutrition seminar that broccoli might be one of the closest things nature offers to a longevity vegetable, which made people laugh, but also made them think about how often they include it in their meals. And here's something interesting about broccoli that many people don't realize. The way you prepare it can make a big difference in taste and enjoyment, because if you simply boil it until it becomes mushy, it probably won't taste very good. But if you lightly steam it or roast it in the oven with a little olive oil, garlic, and maybe a pinch of sea salt, it can actually become one of the most satisfying side dishes on the plate. And once people discover that, they often start eating it more regularly without feeling like they're forcing themselves to follow some strict diet plan. Now let's talk about carrots, because carrots might be one of the most familiar vegetables in the world, yet they still carry some pretty impressive health benefits, especially for people over 60. Carrots are rich in beta-carotene, which the body converts into vitamin A. And vitamin A plays a major role in supporting vision, immune function, and skin health. And vision changes are something that almost everyone experiences gradually as they grow older. Reading small text becomes harder. Night driving can feel more challenging. And bright lights sometimes appear more intense than they used to. And while no vegetable can completely stop the aging process in the eyes, nutrients like beta-carotene help support the structures that keep vision functioning as well as possible over time. And I once heard a retired mechanic named Frank tell a funny story about how his wife started putting carrot sticks next to his favorite chair in the living room because she wanted him to snack on them instead of potato chips while watching baseball games. And at first, he joked that she was trying to turn him into a rabbit. But eventually, he got used to the crunch and started enjoying them more than he expected. And months later, he laughed again, saying he didn't know if the carrots helped his eyesight or not, but he definitely felt less sluggish after snacking, compared to eating greasy chips every evening. And sometimes those small daily swaps can quietly create long-term benefits without feeling like a dramatic lifestyle overhaul. Now, another vegetable that deserves serious attention after 60 is the sweet potato. And sweet potatoes often surprise people because they taste naturally sweet and satisfying while still offering powerful nutritional benefits that support heart health and steady energy levels. Unlike refined carbohydrates that cause blood sugar spikes followed by sudden crashes, sweet potatoes release their energy slowly thanks to their fiber content and complex carbohydrate structure, which helps maintain more stable energy throughout the day. And stable energy becomes incredibly valuable as people grow older because fatigue can sneak up more easily when blood sugar fluctuates too dramatically. And sweet potatoes also provide potassium, which supports healthy blood pressure levels and muscle function. And honestly, they're incredibly versatile in the kitchen because you can bake them, roast them, mash them, or slice them into wedges and cook them until the edges become slightly caramelized and crispy. And many people who begin including sweet potatoes in their weekly meals discover they feel satisfied without needing to rely as heavily on processed snacks or sugary desserts. And that leads us toward the vegetable that surprised even some nutritionists when research began highlighting its benefits for circulation and brain health. And that vegetable is the humble beet, which has been quietly used in traditional diets around the world for generations, but only more recently gained attention in modern nutritional research because beets contain natural nitrates that support blood vessel flexibility and improved blood flow throughout the body. And when blood flows efficiently, the brain receives more oxygen and nutrients, which can support cognitive performance and mental clarity. And several studies examining older adults found that diets rich in nitrate-containing vegetables like beets were associated with improved circulation markers and sometimes even better performance on certain memory and decision-making tests, which is fascinating when you consider how simple and inexpensive beets are compared to many trendy supplements marketed for brain health. And although some people say beets taste a little earthy at first, roasting them with olive oil or slicing them into salads with a little citrus dressing can completely transform their flavor into something surprisingly delicious. And once people discover that, they often begin including them regularly without much effort at all. And here's the bigger lesson behind everything we've talked about so far, because it's not about finding one magical vegetable that fixes everything overnight. Instead, it's about building a plate that contains a variety of colorful plant foods that work together to support different systems inside the body. Spinach helping circulation and muscle function. Broccoli supporting cellular protection and inflammation balance. Carrots supporting vision and immune strength. Sweet potatoes providing stable energy and heart-supporting nutrients. And beets encouraging healthy blood flow and brain nourishment. And when these foods appear regularly on the plate, something subtle begins to happen over time. People often report feeling slightly more energetic, slightly more mentally clear, slightly more resilient during physical activity. And those small improvements add up month after month and year after year. And that's the part many people overlook when they think about aging, because healthy aging isn't usually the result of one big dramatic change. It's usually the result of dozens of small daily habits quietly working together in the background. And the foods we choose every day are one of the most powerful habits we control. And the foods we choose every single day slowly become the story our bodies tell later in life. Which is why the conversation about vegetables after 60 isn't really about dieting or restriction or following some strict health rulebook that makes eating feel like punishment. It's actually about rediscovering something simple that many people forgot somewhere along the way. The idea that food can quietly work with your body instead of against it. And that realization often hits people in surprising ways, because most folks spend decades eating whatever is convenient while they're busy raising families, building careers, paying bills, running errands, and dealing with life's chaos. And then suddenly, one day they wake up in their 60s, and their body starts sending little signals that things are changing. Maybe their knees feel a bit stiff when they stand up from a chair. Maybe their energy dips around mid-afternoon. Maybe their memory slips here and there in ways that never happened before. And those moments can feel unsettling because they seem to appear out of nowhere. But nutrition experts will often explain that these shifts rarely appear overnight. They're usually the result of years of habits quietly shaping the body from the inside. And the encouraging news hidden in that truth is that habits can change, even later in life, sometimes faster than people expect. And one of the easiest places to begin is with what shows up on the plate each day. Because vegetables like the ones we've been talking about aren't just random foods recommended by nutritionists for no reason. They contain compounds that help the body maintain balance as it ages, supporting the systems that keep everything functioning smoothly behind the scenes. And when those systems receive the nutrients they need, something remarkable often happens. People start noticing subtle improvements that gradually grow into meaningful changes. Maybe their digestion becomes more comfortable. Maybe they sleep a little deeper at night. Maybe they feel more stable during their morning walks, or find themselves less winded climbing stairs. And those small victories can become powerful motivation to keep going. Because once someone experiences the difference that simple foods can make, they often realize healthy eating isn't about perfection. It's about consistency, about showing up for your body again and again with choices that support the life you still want to live. And that idea brings us to another important vegetable that many seniors rediscover later in life: kale, which for years had a reputation as one of those trendy health foods people joked about in restaurants and smoothie bars. But behind the jokes, there's actually a lot of nutritional value packed into those dark leafy greens. Kale contains vitamin K, which plays an important role in bone health and proper blood clotting. And bone health becomes increasingly important after 60 because bone density naturally declines with age, increasing the risk of fractures or injuries during falls. And vitamin K works together with calcium and other nutrients to support the strength of bones over time, which means adding a handful of kale into soups or sautéed dishes isn't just about following a health trend. It's about giving your skeletal system the tools it needs to remain strong and resilient as the years move forward. And kale also provides vitamin C, which supports the immune system and helps the body repair tissues after everyday wear and tear. And many people who begin including kale in their meals are surprised by how versatile it can be once they experiment with cooking it properly. Because when it's lightly sautéed with garlic and olive oil, the flavor becomes rich and satisfying rather than bitter. And that kind of discovery often sparks curiosity about other vegetables as well, leading people to explore foods they may have ignored for decades, simply because nobody ever showed them how delicious they could be when prepared the right way. And another vegetable that deserves attention in this conversation is zucchini, which often appears in gardens during the summer months and sometimes gets overlooked because it seems so ordinary. But zucchini contains a combination of hydration, fiber, and micronutrients that support digestion and heart health. And digestion becomes a major focus for many adults after 60 because the digestive system tends to slow down slightly with age, making fiber-rich foods especially valuable for maintaining regularity and gut balance. And when digestion improves, something interesting happens because the gut is closely connected to many other systems in the body, including immune function and even mood regulation, which means simple vegetables like zucchini can quietly influence how people feel both physically and emotionally throughout the day. And speaking of emotional well-being, there's something else worth mentioning here, because food isn't only about nutrients and vitamins. It's also about the memories and traditions attached to meals shared with family and friends. And many seniors find that rediscovering wholesome foods reconnects them with experiences from earlier in life. Perhaps remembering a grandmother who cooked fresh vegetables from a backyard garden, or a parent who prepared simple meals that nourished everyone around the table. And those memories remind people that healthy eating doesn't have to feel clinical or complicated. It can feel warm, familiar, and comforting in ways that modern diet culture sometimes forgets. And that brings us to another vegetable that nutrition experts frequently recommend for supporting heart health and circulation as people age: tomatoes, which technically belong to the fruit family, but are usually treated as vegetables in cooking. And tomatoes contain lycopene, an antioxidant that researchers have linked to heart health and cellular protection against oxidative stress. And oxidative stress is basically the internal wear that accumulates in cells over time due to metabolism and environmental factors. And antioxidants help neutralize some of that stress before it causes long-term damage. Which means foods like tomatoes quietly support the body's ability to repair itself and maintain balance even as years pass by. And tomatoes are also wonderfully versatile because they can appear in salads, soups, sauces, roasted dishes, or even simple sandwiches layered with fresh greens and olive oil. And when people start adding more vegetables like tomatoes into their meals, they often find their plates becoming more colorful and satisfying without needing to rely on heavy, processed foods that leave them feeling sluggish later. And that shift toward colorful plates actually reflects a principle many nutritionists share with their clients. The idea that the more colors you include from natural plant foods, the more diverse the nutrients become, because each color often represents different phytochemicals that support different aspects of health. And when the plate contains greens, oranges, reds, and deep purples, the body receives a wider range of compounds that work together to support overall vitality. And that variety can make meals feel exciting rather than restrictive, because instead of thinking about what you're removing from your diet, you begin thinking about what you're adding to it. And that mindset change can be incredibly powerful, especially for people who spent years believing healthy eating meant giving up everything they enjoyed. But the truth is that balance allows space for enjoyment while still prioritizing nourishment. And this philosophy becomes especially meaningful after 60, because life at that stage often encourages reflection about what truly matters. And many people begin focusing more intentionally on the quality of their days. The energy they feel when spending time with grandchildren or traveling or pursuing hobbies they once postponed during busier years. And nutrition quietly supports all of those experiences in ways that sometimes go unnoticed until people realize how much better they feel when they nourish their bodies consistently. And that realization leads to another interesting observation shared by many dietitians who work with older adults, which is that the people who maintain healthy eating habits later in life often approach food with curiosity rather than fear. They experiment with new recipes, explore farmers markets, try vegetables they've never tasted before, and treat meals as opportunities to support their well-being rather than obstacles to avoid. And that attitude can transform the entire experience of aging, because instead of focusing on limitations, people begin focusing on possibilities, on what their bodies can still do, and how they can continue supporting those abilities through thoughtful choices each day. And one final thought worth remembering is that no single meal will determine your health, just as no single day defines your entire life. What truly matters is the pattern that forms over weeks, months, and years. The pattern of nourishing foods appearing regularly on your plate. The pattern of small positive habits repeating themselves until they become second nature. And when vegetables like spinach, broccoli, carrots, sweet potatoes, beets, kale, zucchini, and tomatoes begin appearing regularly, in those patterns they quietly become allies in the journey of healthy aging, supporting the heart that keeps beating through every adventure, the brain that stores decades of memories and wisdom, the muscles that carry you through daily activities, and the immune system that protects you from illness. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this entire story is that it reminds us aging doesn't have to mean losing vitality or independence. It can mean learning new ways to care for ourselves with patience and kindness, recognizing that every meal is another opportunity to invest in the days ahead. And when people realize the truth, something shifts inside them, because suddenly the vegetables on their plate aren't just food anymore. They become symbols of the life they're still building, one healthy choice at a time. And if there's one message to carry forward from this conversation, it's that the future of your health is not written only by your past habits, but by the choices you continue making today, tomorrow, and every day after that. And sometimes the simplest choices, like adding a few powerful vegetables to your meals, can quietly shape a future filled with strength, clarity, and the freedom to keep living life on your own terms.